Tonight we sit close to the fire, feel its warmth, its light flickering against the darkness around us. But remember, the fire does not reach everything. The forest beyond, it watches and it waits. I am Seraphine Vale, and tonight I will tell you a story from a place that few dare to speak of, a place called the Black Hollow. Listen carefully, lean in, and don't look away, because once the hollow knows you are listening, it begins to know you in return.
Locals avoid it, crossing themselves when they speak its name. Even in the day, the canopy is so thick that the sun only filters through in cold, green-gold shafts. Moss grows thicker here than anywhere else, dampening footsteps and swallowing sound. Streams twist in impossible patterns, and sometimes, if you look too long, the trees seem to lean toward you, as if they are watching you step deeper into their territory. Mark was 22, a backpacker who had grown up listening to campfire legends and dismissing them as superstition. He traveled lightly, carrying only what was necessary: a sleeping bag, a water bottle, and a small flashlight. When he first heard the name Black Hollow, he laughed with friends at a campsite just outside town. "There's nothing there but trees," he said, "and maybe a raccoon or two." But that night, curiosity began to gnaw at him. A dare, a whisper in his mind he could not ignore. By dawn, he had already left his tent and begun the trek toward the hollow. The path was narrow and treacherous. Roots twisted across the trail like veins, the soil damp and slick with morning dew. Birds were silent. Even insects seemed to disappear, leaving only the sound of his boots crunching softly against the forest floor. As he walked, he noticed something strange, a faint glow flickering between the trees ahead. Not sunlight and not moonlight, something else, something warm, inviting, almost human. He followed it without hesitation, convinced it must be another traveler or perhaps a small cabin. But the glow did not belong to wood or glass. It belonged to the hollow itself, and it was drawing him in. Mark's flashlight beam flickered nervously across the trunks. The trees were gnarled, their bark like wrinkled skin, and shadows twisted unnaturally, forming shapes that almost, but never quite, resembled faces. Branches stretched outward, tapping against one another like skeletal fingers in the windless air. Then he heard it, a whisper, low and faint. He stopped. "Mark, Mark." It was his voice, or maybe it was the voice of someone he knew, a friend, his sister. The whispers were indistinct, repeating his name softly, coaxing him further along the winding path. He shook his head. "It's just the wind," he muttered. But the forest was silent. No breeze stirred. Not a single leaf quivered. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, and it drew him deeper. As he moved forward, the forest began to shift. Roots that had been behind him seemed to stretch into the path ahead. Fallen branches leaned to block the way back. And the light, the strange amber glow, was always ahead of him, retreating further the closer he got. His steps became hurried, panic threading through his body, yet he could not turn away. The hollow does not allow escape, not willingly. It wants you, wants to know you, wants your fear. And Mark had walked straight into its arms. He rounded a bend and stopped dead. Between the thick trunks, standing on the path just a few dozen feet away, was something impossibly tall and thin. Its arms dangled past its knees, fingers curling like talons. Its face was a blank void, except for two faint ember-like points of light where eyes should have been. It did not move like a human. It glided silently, smooth as water, yet it covered ground faster than Mark could comprehend. And as it moved, the air seemed to grow heavier, thickening in his lungs, filling his ears with an almost inaudible hum. forest seemed to pulse with life, yet that life was not kind. Roots curled around the edges of the path, as though eager to trap him. He wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. He wanted to run, but his body refused to cooperate. The shadow stopped, amber eyes fixed on him. A voice whispered again, this time clearer, insistent. Come closer. Mark's mind raced. Rational thought collided with instinctual terror. His heart hammered against his ribcage. He knew, somewhere deep inside, that turning and running would not save him. The hollow had already chosen, already marked him. He took a step backward, then another. Then the figure was suddenly closer, though he hadn't moved. The air burned around him, faintly smoky and acrid like a dying fire. And then, the whispers multiplied. Hundreds of voices calling his name, some pleading, some mocking, some weeping. They drifted from the trees, from the ground, from above. The ember-eyed shadow glided toward him, silent except for the whispers, and Mark realized with a horrifying clarity that he was not the first, and he would not be the last. He tripped over a root, falling hard onto the damp soil. His flashlight skidded across the ground, spinning and casting grotesque moving shadows. The figure hovered above him, eyes glowing steadily. Mark tried to scream, to fight, to pull himself up, but the hollow had already claimed him. Roots shot up from the ground, twisting around his arms, his legs, as though the forest itself had arms now. He struggled, and for a moment, the ember-eyed figure paused, almost watching, almost curious. Then the light went out. The forest returned to stillness. No whispers, no wind, no footprints, just the damp, mossy floor and the faint scent of smoke, as if a fire had been burned in the darkness. Mark was gone. Days later, hikers found his pack carefully placed beneath a tangle of roots. His flashlight lay on top, still flickering weakly, but Mark himself had vanished. The locals whispered that the hollow keeps those who enter, not as corpses, but as part of the forest itself. Their eyes become part of the shadows. Their voices join the whispers that lure the next soul. Some say, if you wander near the hollow at night, you can hear Mark's voice, calling, beckoning, soft, familiar, impossible to ignore. It is the sound of curiosity meeting hunger, of daring meeting the patience of a forest that knows how to wait. And that, my listener, is the caution of the Black Hollow. Never assume that legends are only stories. Sometimes stories are all that stands between you and the dark. Remember this, the hollow is patient, it does not forget, and it is always hungry for the curious. The village by the river had existed for centuries, its people simple, their lives intertwined with the water. Mothers warned their children, do not follow the singing at night. Fathers would hold their sons close when the fog rolled in, recounting tales of those who had been lured by something beneath the rippling surface. The adults knew the water was alive in more ways than one. On moonless nights, fishermen would whisper of strange shapes beneath the surface, long pale figures with eyes that reflected nothing but darkness. Those who stared too long would vanish. Others would return days later, their eyes glazed, their voices distant, forever changed by what they had seen. Thomas, a boy of 16, had grown up on these warnings, but he was curious, as most of us are when danger is forbidden. He had watched the river many nights, listening to the sounds of the water and imagining what could be beneath the surface. And then, one misty evening, he heard it. It was faint at first, almost drowned by the rush of the current. A soft melody, carried in the fog above the river. It sounded like a voice voice, his sister's voice, long gone to the river years before. "Thomas, Thomas," it called, delicate and sorrowful. He froze. The fog curled around him like fingers, brushing his face. Every rational thought he had screamed, "Do not go, do not follow." Yet he felt compelled, drawn, as if the voice had reached into the very center of his being. His feet carried him forward. His lantern swung lightly in his hand, casting jittering shadows across the water. The song grew stronger, coaxing him toward the center of the riverbank, where reeds swayed unnaturally, bending toward him as if the river itself had arms. Thomas's friends would later swear they saw him pause, kneeling at the edge, peering into the misty water, eyes wide with awe and terror. The surface shimmered unnaturally, and for a moment, the reflection in the river was not his own. It was a face pale and beautiful, eyes deep pools of black, lips moving in song. He leaned closer. The song grew louder, melodic, hypnotic. It was pleading. It was sorrowful. It was dangerous. Thomas tried to retreat. He stumbled, mud sucking at his boots, reeds wrapping around his legs. The song didn't stop. It was now layered, multiple voices, harmonizing, coaxing, whispering, promising him reunion with those he had lost. But the river was patient. It never needed force, only surrender. He turned to run, but the fog shifted. The familiar path back had vanished. Every tree, every rock, every curve in the river seemed rearranged, as though the forest and water itself had conspired to keep him there. The lantern fell from his hand, spinning across the muddy ground. Its light cast dancing shadows, reflections that were not his own. And in those reflections, he glimpsed her, the siren. Pale, beautiful, impossibly long hair flowing like water, eyes black and unyielding, mouth moving in silent song. Her lips glistened, and behind her, the river shimmered unnaturally, glowing faintly as if lit from within. She emerged slowly from the water, her hair floating around her, hiding yet revealing, drawing Thomas in with every movement. Her beauty was undeniable, and her presence filled him with an instinctual terror. The villagers had said she was a woman once, perhaps, but her humanity had long since dissolved, leaving only hunger and the call of the river. Thomas wanted to look away, but he could not. Her eyes fixed on him. They seemed to pierce his very thoughts, his memories, his fears. And then, she sang again, the sound echoing, vibrating in the fog. Thomas felt a tug inside his chest, as though invisible hands were dragging him forward. He tried to cry out. His voice barely escaped his throat. He stumbled into the shallow current. The water was freezing, but the song wrapped around him, warm as a blanket, soft as a lullaby. He could feel himself being drawn closer, closer, until the fog swallowed everything except the siren's eyes, glowing black and merciless. The villagers, awakened by distant sounds, ran to the riverbank. Torches cut through the mist, illuminating the reeds and rippling water. But Thomas was gone. Only the lantern floated gently on the surface, spinning weakly in the current. No footprints led into the water. No one saw him enter. Only the soft, melodic echo of a voice calling from the river remained. Fishermen say that on certain nights, if the fog is thick and the moon hangs low, you can hear him. His voice joins the siren's chorus, calling from the bank or from somewhere beneath the water. Some nights, they swear the boy appears on the surface, lips moving in song, before vanishing again into the depths. The river doesn't release them. It does not punish. It only collects and remembers, and it waits patiently for the next curious soul who dares to listen to the singing in the mist. And now, we leave the forest and the river behind and enter a village haunted by a presence far older than the trees, far deeper than the water. They call her the Krasue, a creature of flesh and shadow whose hunger knows no bounds. Do not look away. Do not think you are safe, because tonight, the darkness wears a human face. In villages across Southeast Asia, people whisper about women who are neighbors by day, but monsters by night. Mothers warn their children not to peek from windows after sunset. Fathers block doorways with thorns, incense, or salt, yet the stories persist. The Krasue is said to be a woman during daylight hours, quiet, gentle, living among the people, perhaps tending to her home, children, or garden. But when the sun sets, the truth reveals itself. Her head detaches from her body, floating into the night, organs dangling below, eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural hunger. People who've seen her emerge rarely survive to speak of it, but those who do describe a sound, a wet dragging, a soft, horrifying squelch, almost like the river of blood beneath her, accompanied by a whispering call in the local tongue. The Krasue seeks flesh, seeking the unwary, searching for the blood that will sustain her until the next sunset. Our story tonight centers on a man named Keat, a young merchant visiting his family in a small, isolated village. He had heard the tales of the Krasue, of course, but dismissed them as superstition. Until that night, when curiosity and disbelief would collide with the supernatural. Keat returned from his duties late at night, carrying rice and goods. Lantern light stretched long shadows across the narrow village paths. He noticed a woman walking alone, her head bowed, moving slowly along the edge of the village. Something about her gait seemed strange, but he could not place it. It wasn't until he saw her shadow that his stomach twisted, for the shadow on the wall did not match her body. It was elongated, grotesque, and moving independently. He blinked, thinking it a trick of the lanterns, but then he heard it, a soft, wet dragging sound from the alley behind her. Frozen, he watched as the woman suddenly looked up. Her eyes were empty pools, reflecting the lantern light in eerie ways. She smiled, just slightly, but that smile did not reach her eyes. And as he stepped closer, the impossible happened. Her head lifted from her shoulders, hovering in the air, while the body remained behind, thin, pale, glowing veins dangling beneath the floating head. Keat stumbled backward, heart pounding, unable to scream. The Krasue did not immediately attack. She floated through the air silently, scanning the village for life, for blood, for warmth. Keat ran through the narrow alleyways, knocking over barrels and baskets, desperate to escape. But the creature moved with terrifying grace, her head turning in impossible ways to follow him. Every time he thought he could hide, she would appear again, between lanterns, behind walls, in the mist rising from the river that bordered the village. Her voice was faint at first, a wet, slithering whisper. It promised safety, then threatened death. Her song was a warning and a lure combined. Keat ducked into a hut, pressing himself against the wall, holding his breath. The floating head entered the doorway, dragging her body beneath her, organs swaying, eyes gleaming. She sniffed the air, almost tasting him, and then, just as suddenly, she moved on. The villagers had left the doors open that night, hoping to appease her, yet no charm, no incense, no salt could fully stop her. She was clever, she was patient, she was hungry. The Krasue does not attack indiscriminately. She hunts those who are awake, those who linger in shadows, those who peek through windows at night. Her hunger is eternal, her method terrifyingly precise. Keat realized that the only way to survive was to remain unseen. He hid beneath a table, trembling as the wet, dragging sound approached, as the whispering grew louder. like minutes. Finally, the sun began to rise. She let out a soft, wet sigh and retreated. The body rejoined the head, forming the woman once again, her face innocent and pale, as if nothing had happened. Keat waited until she disappeared into the mist, and then collapsed in exhausted relief. Even in daylight, however, the memory lingered. The floating head, the dangling organs, the eyes that had seen straight into his soul. He knew that Krasue would return the next night, and the night after that, always hunting, always patient.
3 tales tonight. The hollow that swallows men whole, the siren that sings in stolen voices, and the Krasue, who reminds us that monsters sometimes wear human faces until the dark peels them away. These stories may seem far apart, yet they share one truth. Once the night chooses you, there is no bargaining, no pleading, only silence, water, and hunger. Stay close to the fire, or you might just become the next story